Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for watching. While you're with us, please take a moment to subscribe below, and now let's do some pushing back against those crazy liars and propagandists from the SJW Flunky Brigade. This essay will be about Western education systems, Western political and bureaucratic attitudes to education, and focus particularly on the English-speaking world where social ideologies have played such a prominent role over the last 40 years in corrupting higher education. We've reached a situation in Western education systems where our educators are openly denouncing merit and excellence as being an evil. And this is in advanced tertiary education. Excellence and evil? How did it come to this? To add some perspective, more gender studies degrees, masters and PhDs are issued in North America than the rest of the world combined. North America is also producing more, sometimes twice as many race-based sociology degrees, such as African American studies, than the rest of the world put together. Should this be seen as a crowning achievement of American education, or an era of foolish wastefulness that history will judge very harshly? You've probably seen or heard recently the many violent student demonstrations in university campuses across the Western world, and particularly in North America, destroying property, arson, tearing down 250-year-old public statues in public places, howling down visiting speakers they don't agree with, assaulting those they don't agree with, assaulting those wishing to listen to non-politically correct lectures. In many cases, lecturers are joining in with the demonstrations. And let's keep in mind, these student protesters, who are some of the most privileged people in the world, are claiming at the same time to be oppressed and even chained. Not long ago, universities consisted of our best and brightest, folks who had worked and studied hard to earn their place in those lecture rooms. Today, the ideologically infantile and simplistic are everywhere in the majority in our university campuses. Overwhelmingly, the protesters and slogan chanters we see on so many college campuses are those teaching and attending those soft, no one fails, sociology, basket weaver courses. Soft courses that have reproduced like lemmings over the last 30 or so years, and handed to students with extremely modest academic abilities. These students attend everyone passes courses that teach PhD level infantile irresponsibility and uncritical acceptance that the only measure of social equality is equal social outcomes, which of course means educational outcomes. If social outcomes are not exactly equal, the cause must be, or so we're told, or is ideologically determined to be, some terrible social ill requiring convulsive and violent intervention, and this mentality is at the core of student SJW activism. It is worth understanding how education has changed and become politicised in the era of cultural Marxism. Yet we should also recognise other technological changes that have also affected education today. In the pre-high-speed internet age, education contained a large informational knowledge component. Facts. Knowing facts was a key element of understanding the wider issues associated with those facts. The ready access to information from the information superhighway internet has fundamentally changed how education is perceived. As information and facts are now so easily come by, educators and particularly sociologists are arguing facts and also the accurate context of facts just don't matter anymore. Unrelated facts can now be woven into an imaginative narrative that need only be emotionally true. Following a little behind America and most of the Western world, in the 1970s, less than a third of those who started high school went on to senior high school, and less than 3% would complete a university education. As many as a quarter of students at the time would not make it past the first year of university, given the emphasis, or the then emphasis rather, on rigour and excellence. Up to a third would drop out. Gifted students not from wealthy families were eligible to apply for a taxpayer-funded scholarship. Sociology courses teaching hatred of whites and the purported omnipresence of gender and race oppression were somewhat rare in places like Canada, Australia and Britain, but becoming increasingly noticeable in the United States as the 1960s drew to a close, particularly in the activist areas of California and New York. Today, more than 50% of those who begin high school go to university across the Western world. In parts of the United States, the number of high school grads going to university exceeds 70%. With education outputs now being centrally planned by bureaucrats and increasingly a merit-free zone, some Western governments are bravely planning that all those who start high school will eventually and totally non-meritoriously go through the tertiary education system over the next few decades. It's a big change and is only made possible by disregarding rigour and merit, which, apart from the short-term feel-goodism of horribly misguided social virtue, this is unlikely to benefit society in the short or long term. and the way it's unfolding it today is looking like a disaster in the making. Much, if not all, the increase in university attendance comes with the ideological obsession over the forced pursuit of equal educational outcomes in gender, race and sexual orientation, as an end in itself, rather than achieving a greater number of students reaching a standard of rigorous quality education. In fact, a quality merit-based education is currently seen by many SJWs as an evil white male construct, as if social equality and a meaningless low-grade education are somehow synonymous or even inseparable. These new educational all students be processed through university policies have increased the university intake by almost 3,000% from the late 60s. Yes, that's 3,000%, which has transformed university entrance from a once high bar merit system to a low bar stampede of a new entitlement generation of kids who under a normal merit system wouldn't have made it past junior high school. They are now passing through college soft courses and gaining multiple degrees or even masters and PhDs in an everyone gets a prize system. To cater for all these very subprime students, and I mean subprime, special courses are developed and offered guaranteeing an easy pass, no one fails standard of education, which by necessity it must be high in emotions, moral posturing, jingoistic nonsense while being fact and rigour free. Reviewing master's and PhD papers in these soft degree courses, one is astounded by the poor standard and quality of the students' work, and by extension the F grade academics who grade this trash as a pass or distinction. They contain myriad factual errors, infantile assertions, and Marxist-style emotive language abound. The sanctimonious moral preening in many student papers is near obscene. The work we reviewed was so bad, if papers like these had been handed in by even a struggling first-year high school student in a merit-only system, they would have been graded a fail. Yet the sloppiest student papers in university today are routinely awarded distinction-level grades, demonstrating the utter disconnect between grading outcomes and reality. According to some statistics from 1986, in the United States, more masters and PhDs were issued to women and minorities than to white males. However, it will come as no surprise that all but a few of these PhDs were in sociology and other soft courses, such as African American studies and interpretive dance. Gender studies related sociology courses, for example, produce more masters than all of the STEM courses combined. Quite literally, students who may never do more than sweep floors are being gifted places at university and then additionally gifted ideological degrees. Unearned degrees increase a sense of entitlement, followed by a sense of gratification denied, and with this comes confusion and anger as over the ensuing years reality gradually bites. Pinning a fake degree on the back of a floor sweeper does not magically turn them into a top-drawer software programmer or rocket scientist, and therefore does not create the social equality nirvana that an earned education might come closer to realising. When equal outcome ideology deals itself into the education game, everything changes, and not for the best. Ultimately, no one wins. What if society was reordered so that all racial and gender groups had degrees? Would we not then have a utopian equal society where everyone, the brightest and the least bright, were all the same? What a perfect Marxist world it would be. Not quite. In reality, the number of students actually earning their degrees today is proportionally about the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago, whereas all the additional non-merit students that are clogging the universities and causing these demonstrations are just being passed through the system, receiving various free tickets, sundry dispensations, soft marking to get them across the line. The increase in number of degree holders today does not reflect a brighter society or a cleverer society, but is merely a reflection of how many entitlement-obsessed, unearned degree holders there are out there today. I have been on employment interview panels, and the difference between students who have earned their degrees and those who've had it handed to them shows up, and I mean it shows up big time. The difference between those who've earned it and those who've been given it is chalk and cheese. They're worlds apart, and it shows. Handing out degrees does not make people equal. Their desires can be equal, their aspirations can be equal, but their capacity to realise such desires and aspirations is quite different. In some universities, it is policy to guarantee certain alleged minorities a degree under all circumstances, even if all they do is occasionally attend. They can flunk all their exams, but they will still get a degree. In other universities, very soft exam questions administered by very politically correct committees are available, but only for minorities. In some cases, it is even discriminatory to require certain minorities to sit an exam. So how are these educational policies in regard to equal outcomes playing out in the real world? Not so well, it seems. When only 30% of students completed high school and 2 or 3% of the population completed degrees, these certifications, these degrees actually meant something. They had value. For the most part, they were a useful indication of who had met a higher educational standard and a measure of the ability to learn and master complexity. They had real bankable value. But when 2 out of every 3 people, or 3 out of every 4, or even more, has a degree, they become a commodity with much less relative value. Similarly, as the value of a university degree declines, because almost everyone has one, the holding of a degree becomes a minimum entry level or a minimum entry standard for jobs that were once available to junior high school dropouts. So reality has adjusted itself around the craziness, around the fantasy, and after years of college, folks are actually right back where they started. Even with a degree, they're still applying for those jobs that previously high school dropouts would take. That is, an unearned university degree does not get to hold a better paying job, but rather the job they would once have got anyway without the degree. But now they carry a hefty tuition fee, a debt, and have lost 3 or 4 years of income earning. It's all been for nothing. But maybe this is a great deal for employers. Maybe we can find some skerrick of value somewhere in all this. Do employers now get a university-educated worker for the same amount they would have once paid for a junior high school dropout? If so, this might be worth something still. Well, not quite. As the educational standards have been so substantially watered down in high school and university, many university degree holders are no more literate and informed today than a junior high school dropout of 30 or so years ago, and may even be less literate. What has happened is that armies of floor sweeper designates are being pushed through universities and in the process saddled with a lot of tuition debt to gain a worthless qualification. But now they have acquired career and income expectations far beyond any reality, supported by their abilities and their capacities. Similarly, the drive to succeed and the personal responsibility required to put in the effort to succeed has also been diluted by each unearned university degree that has been issued. I got a degree and now I'm going to sit here and everyone got to give me all the good stuff. It's never going to work. So, does the wider community somehow benefit from all these newly minted basket weaver interpretive dance degree holders, either now or in the foreseeable future? Even a community benefit seems elusive. Taxpayer-funded loans to students now run into the multi-billions, and many will never be employed in jobs that pay enough money to repay those loans. Some sources allege up to $1 billion a year, and for example, Australian university student loans is written off by the government as unrecoverable each year. And so is all this social justice education just a heavy direct cost and impost to the taxpayer, absent any obvious benefit? It's certainly seeming so. Students who may later achieve an income that permits them to service the student loans can be in their late 30s or 40s before they're free of university debt. How can they possibly get on with their lives under such circumstances? Fewer than 10% of graduates achieve incomes that allow them to easily service their student debt. Are the other 90% who cannot or struggle with the debt becoming a lost generation, never able to gather sufficient economic momentum to lead meaningful lives? If so, what a tragedy. In many cases, a fake university education just holds students back. Junior high school dropout students who would otherwise have gone out and got a job or learned a technical trade and paid tax and consumed goods and services now give up 3, 4, even 6 or more years of their life to receive or gain a severely watered-down tertiary education that delivers no tangible benefit to them or society and leaves them with crippling student loan debts along with a diminished capacity to act and behave productively given their expectations are so high. Many big city downtown cafes employ wait staff, all of whom have sociology or gender studies or interpretive dance degrees. Some are in their mid-30s and only ever worked at picking up empty coffee cups and sweeping floors. Yet it is the knock-on or collateral effects of equal educational outcomes, its attendant baggage, that hit the hardest and have ramifications for the wider Western economy, including the United States. Business no longer invests in training. The cost of training is now passed to the worker, even though the training education has little or no practical applicability to the job they may do, and many will have multiple career changes in their working lives. Must workers now pay for a new degree with each career change? This could happen 5 or 6 times in a lifetime. Is each time going to require a new degree? How many can afford such an expensive life cost paradigm? A series of occupational changes that is forced upon them by a globalisation that they never asked for and never voted for. Young people are paying for, in effect, being forced to pay for their own training that was once the responsibility of corporate America and corporate Western world. And this has become or created a false paper certification, low skills economy. People run around with bits of paper, these university degrees, but they have no skills and no knowledge, but great debts. Even working in a discount electrical store as a new hire flunky requires a 6-month community college diploma and a debt of $8,000 to $10,000 to kids ill-disposed to afford it. It is almost tantamount to buying a job. Is this not the employment model of more than 100 years ago? The employer wants an out-of-the-box certification employee, even for the lowest wage or short-term part-time job. Higher and higher educational certifications are now required for even basic jobs, creating a perverse spiral that places upward pressure on certifications while reducing the pressure on standards for ever lower pay grades. Jobs that pay considerably less than the average wage routinely require postgraduate qualifications, often citing a master's as the preferred minimum requirement for getting this below average wage job. To put some personal financial perspective, a degree and a master's from, say, a mid to upper mid-tier college will leave the student in debt for a minimum of, say, $150,000 before earning their first wage dollar. The college debt would thus be, in many cases, a debt for life. The ideological equal outcome education workforce is not better trained than the previous generations, and the wage purchasing power of those workers fresh out of university is arguably less than a 15-year-old apprentice of 40 plus years ago. Why bother with years at university when wage purchasing power is declining at such a rapid rate and job security is disappearing? The Western world is witnessing a phenomenon of cost input deflection where market forces are subverted twice over. The value of the education is destroyed, and where the legitimate cost of doing business, training workers, is being pushed back onto the citizen. On the wider matter of training and education, Western business has become lazy and negligent, which is helped along, if not fueled, by social justice. Everyone must have a degree education. Pushing off training and certification and education to the citizenry is not a wider cost problem solved for business or the nation's balance sheet. No one really gains, and the citizenry are getting screwed, but rather costs, training costs, education costs, are simply being moved around inside the economy, leaving in the final analysis no net benefit for anyone. Students paying off student loans are not buying other goods and services. Natural market forces of labour demand and training costs have been squeezed out of the interlinked chain of economic cause and effect, and thus natural corrective mechanisms in the economy are being bypassed. Pushing high school dropout kids through university to attend nonsense rubbish courses, taking on loans they cannot afford, and does not provide better trained or more vocationally focused or suitable workers for the economy. Ultimately, we all pay with higher taxes and lower standards of living. So a pursuit of equal educational outcomes may ultimately be a cruel and foolish game inflicted on unwitting young people, turning many of them, who should not be at university at all, into angry and bitter entitlement junkies, frantically looking for someone or something to blame, and who have no confidence in Western culture, our institutions or our values. This all may have actually created the condition through which social trust, acquired over many previous generations, could all be lost in just a single generation. Yet more concerning still is increasingly widespread community attitude that a form of social equality that requires, if not demands, a dumbing down of the population so severe that all merit everywhere is regarded as evil and sinister. And this attitude is now creeping into, if not stampeding into, many other areas in commerce, government and other aspects of social economics. This will have a deadly effect upon the Western economies. Surely any civilization pursuing such a course of action is actively seeking its own demise. We all need to stare down this madness, the idiotic notion that dumbass, lazy, entitlement-obsessed students must or should be given parity of outcome with the brightest and hard-working students that we have in society. Students that have the drive to make their own breaks in life. Allowing this to happen as it has, it's a lunatic's fantasy. Naturally bright students from difficult or restrictive circumstances can be identified, and then they should, and quite rightly should, receive taxpayer-funded scholarships. And this would be taxpayer-funded money well spent. And let's increase this. Let's make sure that all bright students have access to these scholarships, so no bright student is left behind. We all need to ask why. Why are your taxpayer dollars paying for this educational SJW madness? And why are Western, particularly English-speaking governments, pursuing this reckless course of action, manifestly creating many more problems than the imaginary ones they purport to solve? If not you, the people, who will ask the questions? You've been with Tacitus today. Thank you for watching. We hope you found this video informative. All our essays are available as ebooks, or select any 15 of our essays in printed format. Please order at the link below.